Hello and welcome to the first episode in the PHP Object Oriented Programming series. Today we're going to focus on a sort of a brief overview, if you will, of OOP in PHP. I'm going to demonstrate how we can actually define a class, as well as an explanation as to what a class is, what is the difference between classes and objects, and how we can look at everyday objects as classes and create those in our programming world. So what is a class and what is an object? Well, a class is basically a definition of an object. A class defines what the object is in the sense that what the properties are and the actions that the object can have. And an object is basically an instance of a class. It's a member. It has a state, a series of properties and values that you define explicitly. So, for example, you define, say, the first name or the last name, whereas the class actually defines that there is a first name and there is a last name, but it doesn't actually define what they are. So you can think of an object as an instance of a class. Okay, so you can have lots of objects, you can have lots of classes as well, but you can have lots of objects that are objects of or instances of classes, right? So if you were to think of a vehicle or a car, for example, and you had a car class, that car could have a series of properties such as number of doors, color of the car, size of engine, that kind of thing, whereas the object would define the actual values. So, for example, the actual value of the number of doors. So you could have 4 doors, you could have 5 doors, you could have 3 doors, number of the engine size and so forth, and the color, blue or white or black. Whereas the class knows that there is a property called color, but it doesn't actually know the value of that property. It's basically a blueprint, a manifest of what the object can contain. It's also a blueprint of how the class acts, both within itself, so a series of actions, a series of methods that the car can do. It doesn't necessarily define how those methods work, because you can actually inject properties into those methods and so forth. But for example, with a car, you could have a method of starting and stopping and turning and pressing the indicators on and so forth. But the object could define how fast the car is going, or how loud the music is playing and so forth, because you can actually put in properties into those methods. So you could have a method of turn the radio on, and then you could supply a series of properties to define the volume in which the radio sound, the audio is playing at. Another example could be people. Okay, so you could have a class that is a person, and you could have a series of properties that the class defines. So for example, hair color, gender, first name and last name, and then the object, the member, the instance of that class will actually define the value of the first name, the value of the last name, whether it's the person is a female or a gender or whatever, and say the hair color and so forth. And likewise with the car, the person can also have methods for sleeping and waking and working and eating and so forth, and also talking, so greeting and so forth. Let's just create some classes now. It might come a little bit more obvious as I do that. So I'll stop my rambling and get on with the code. So the first thing we're going to do in PHP is actually define the class by the keyword class, and we're going to use the person example as I mentioned before. So we're going to add the name of the class here, which is person, and we're going to open up the curly braces and close the curly braces like so. Okay, now the next thing we're going to do is define the properties that make up this class, and the properties are first name, like so, as well as last name, and we're also going to add gender as well. Now you may have noticed that this red exclamation mark here that my IDE has picked up, and that's because there is an unexpected variable of first name. This is basically because I haven't declared yet the type, the type of property that I would like to have. And there's three types of properties that we can choose from. The first is public, second is protected, and thirdly and lastly it's private. Now those types change the behavior of the properties. So as a quick rundown, public allows you to access the property outside of the class as well as change its definition, so you change its value, for example. Protected only allows the property to be accessed from within the class as well as from within an extending class. Now I'll talk about extending classes and so forth in the future tutorials. And private basically means that it's only accessible internally to that class. It can't be accessed by extending classes, and nor can it be accessed from outside of the class. Again, don't worry too much about those three. I will demonstrate in more detail as I go on. Right now what I'm going to do is just define these as public. So public first name, public last name, oops, and public gender, like so. Excuse me. Now what we need to do is instantiate the class, and there's a magic method that gets called during instantiation, and that is the constructor method. And like the properties, we need to define the type of method, and all methods within the class can have these types. So again, it's private, public, and protected. They have a similar meaning as the properties in the sense that private can only be accessed internally to that class. Protected can be overwritten and accessed in other classes, and public can be accessed from outside of the class. Don't worry too much again about those just yet. We'll get into those in future tutorials, but right now I need to create a public public function, which is the constructor. Now the constructor is a magic method, as I mentioned. Magic methods start with underscore underscore, and here we go. So let's just save that just so we can format it properly, and we're going to actually supply some properties into this constructor. The first property is the first name, and the second property is last name, and you guessed it, the last property will be the gender, but I'm going to equal that to F. So we're going to default that to F for female. Now what we need to do is set the values on these properties, and we do so like this. So we put in a keyword called this, and then hyphen, greater than symbol, and then first name. Now notice my IDE has picked up that we have these three options here: gender, first name, last name, because it knows that the scope of this has access to these three properties. So again, oops, I should do that in between just for consistency. This last name is equal to last name, and this first name is equal to first name, and gender is also equal to gender, like so. And we're going to save that. Now the thing that we need to do in order to create this person class is we need to instantiate it. We need to create an object, a member instance that will have some state, some explicit values set against this person. So we're just going to create a person called Tom, and we're going to equal that to a new person. Now what that does is it instantiates the person class, and we can put in three properties in here: first name, last name, and gender. So the first name here, I'm just going to have Tom. Last name, I'm going to have Ben, and and I'm not going to bother with the gender as that is optional, which will be set to, actually no I will, I'll set that to M for male. Okay, let's save that, and then what I'm going to do is echo out Tom, and I'm going to echo out the first name like so, and then I'm going to echo out a new line like that. I'm also going to open up the terminal so I can run the file. So PHP tutorial1, and we echo that, and we have Tom. So we have we've accessed the first name. First name is the property on here. Now, a couple of things that we can do is we can actually create a method to pull out the first and last name, and we can do this like so. It's going to be a public method because we're accessing it outside of the class, and it's going to be a function, and we're going to call this function say hello. This is going to be an action that this person can do. So we are going to return a string which says hello, my name is, and we're going to access the properties. We're going to concatenate these properties. So this first name, and if you followed along with my previous tutorials, I have a demonstration of concatenation and more information as to how we can concatenate variables, but for now we're just going to concatenate this string. So first name space and then this last name like so, and we're going to save that. And then what we can do here on the person is, instead of call the first name directly, we can call this method, so say hello like so, and we're going to save that and then run this. Okay, so now we have hello, my name is Tom Ben, and excuse me, and we can create several objects, several member objects of this class, so several class instances. So we can have Tom, and we can have Jane, and Jane is going to equal a new person, and we're going to instantiate the person with Jane as the first name, and the last name is, I'm just going to keep Ben for example. Save that, and we're also going to do a new line here, and then we're going to do Jane say hello as well as Tom say hello, and we're going to put in a new line just to give us some room, and then run that. So now we have this, we have hello, my name is Tom Ben, hello, my name is Jane Ben. So can you see that we are basically encapsulating this information within these two objects? We've created a single class called person, and we are instantiating the person with some properties, and the properties get set during the constructor. Constructor gets called on instantiation, so we call that automatically, passing in the first name, the last name, and the gender like so. Now, other things that we can do is we can also return the gender as well. So for example, we can do public function get gender, and we can just return this gender, just like we've done before with the first name and last name. And so we can do say hello, and then we're going to concat that to gender is equal or colon to Jane get gender like so, and we're going to save that, run this, and we should see that we have an F here. Okay, so that's a very brief explanation into classes and objects. I will be going into far more detail as the tutorials progress. We're going to talk about public, protected, and private properties and methods in more detail in the next tutorial, next Tuesday, so do subscribe to get that. But if you've got any comments so far, then please, or questions, then please leave them in the comment section below, or you can grab hold of me via Twitter. My Twitter handle is @PFWD. Like the video if you found it helpful, and do subscribe to get the next PHP tutorial next Tuesday, as well as the web chat this Friday. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I shall see you again soon. Thank you. Bye. Hello and welcome to the second part of the Object Oriented Programming course in PHP. Today we're going to look at class inheritance, or a very basic tutorial in class inheritance. In the last tutorial we did we focused on actually creating classes and objects in PHP, and the differences between classes and objects as well. So do check out that video if you haven't done so already. I'll leave a link in the description as well as in the top right hand corner here. But today we're going to focus on inheritance and class inheritance, and how one class can inherit the properties and the methods that we allow in another class. Now, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to have inheritance? Well, there could be objects that need to have access to other properties, other methods that the other objects may offer, and they may be closely related. So for example, let's use an example of an employee, right? So right now we have a person with a first name, last name, and gender. We could also have a class of employee. So for example, if we scroll down here, we could have Jane here, that we've instantiated a new person class. She could be an employee somewhere, and so the employee class would have properties that are that should be encapsulated for the employee class. So for example, she may have a job title and an employee number and so forth. But an employee is also a person, and therefore you could have the employee class extending the person class, and that will allow the employee class to have access to certain properties and methods that we make available. So in this case, because everything's set to public, and I will get onto visibility scopes further down the line in these tutorials, but we can access the first name, last name, and gender, as well as accessing these methods here. So let's do that. Let's create an employee class that extends the person class, and I'll demonstrate how we can have access to these properties and these methods. Excuse me, I've got a bit of a cough. So okay, let's build the class. So right now I'm going to just create the class as is, and then I'm going to demonstrate inheritance once the class has been built. So we're going to do a new class, and we're going to call this employee, and we are going to just give a single property, which is just public. And for now we're just going to do not first name, sorry, job title, like so. And we're also going to create a constructor, so public function construct, like so. We're going to pass in the job title as the first argument, and we're going to do this job title is equal to job title, like so. And then we're just going to also have a public function get job, and we're going to return like that. Okay, so we've just created our employee class. We have a property of job title and a constructor which you pass in job title as the first argument, and then that gets set. So this job title is equal to job title here, and then we've also got a public function job title. Like I said, I'm going to get into visibility scopes further down the line and discuss what the difference is between these different scopes. So at the moment they're all public, but let's not worry about that too much at the moment. So let's scroll down here. Let's remove some of this stuff that we created in the last tutorial, and let's just do employee is equal to a new instance. So we're going to instantiate, new employee I'm coding whilst I'm talking. So new employee, and we're passing in a job title, and this is just going to be backend developer. And what we're also going to do is echo employee get job title, and we're going to save that. Let's just double check that that is correct. So we are actually echoing this out. That's fine. Okay, so now we should just see the backend developer being printed out. Let's save that. So PHP, excellent. Okay, so we have the backend developer being printed. That's fine. Okay, great. So at the moment, the employee has no concept or no association to the person. So in order to inherit the person, in order to extend the person, we need to put in the keyword extends, and then a space, and then the class that we wish to extend. So person, like so. Now, what have we just done? Well, we've extended the person, or sorry, we extended the employee to the person. This means that this is now the base class person, and this is the subclass employee. Employee is now hanging off of person. So now we should have the scope of accessing the methods that are declared as public in this case of the class person. But we're going to get a couple of issues because we haven't actually set the first name or the last name or the gender. Now notice that we have a constructor in here, a public function constructor. We're passing in the first name, the last name, and the gender. And in this constructor, we're only passing in the job title. Now, because this class inherits the person class, we can now access the public constructor here. We can the person constructor, and what we do is we use the parent keyword. So I'm going to just put in the space under here. We can actually do parent like so, colon colon, and then construct, and we can access. We can now set the variables in the person constructor within this constructor here. And now obviously I need to actually create or pass these first name, last names, and genders in. So let's just do that now. So we can do first name, last name, and gender. Now we're setting gender to be what are we setting gender as default? F. So gender is equal to F. Let's just keep that consistent. So let's save that. Excuse me. So what we can do is scroll down here and change that to be Jane again. So Jane is now an instance of employee. We're just going to change that to be Jane, like so. And we're actually now we need to give some more properties. So we've got the backend developer as the job title. We also have the first name, which is Jane. We have the second name, which we're gonna call, I don't know, I'm just gonna do Fisher for that, for instance. And then the gender, which we don't actually need because that gets set by default. So let's just save that and click onto here. So we have the job title, the first name, the last name, and the gender, and we're then calling the constructor, passing in these three variables. So let's save that, and let's just ensure that this still works. So this should just return, this is just for my benefit, just return the backend developer. That's great. Now what we've done here is we've instantiated the employee class. We've passed in the job title as the first argument, and then these two properties, they actually get set on the person class that this employee class inherits. So I can now do echo, let's just put in a new line, echo, and then Jane, get gender. So let's save that. Okay, and then run this. Let's just clear that down, just give some more room. Okay, so we now have the gender of female now, or F. So F gets set if that doesn't, if by default. So what we're doing is we're calling the constructor this employee constructor, which calls the person constructor, which is let's just bring that back into focus. There we go. So it calls the person constructor. There we go. Calls the person constructor, passing in the first name and the last name and the gender. Gender hasn't been passed, and therefore it's set to F. And then we're calling the get gender, but we're calling the get gender from this employee class. The reason why we can do that is because we've extended the person class, and therefore we have access to this method. Likewise, if I was to do public function get name, for instance. Well, actually what we can do, forgive me, is we can just do say hello, right? So we can actually access this say hello method from this employee class. So let's just do that. There we go. Hello, my name is Jane Fisher. Okay, so what we can't do, however, is we can't do this. We can't instantiate a new person, so person, and we can't, let's just supply that. We can't do person get job title. If we were to save that and run this, we will get an error, and the error is an undefined method person get job title, because what we're doing here is we're instantiating the person class, which is this class here, which has no knowledge of the employee. Okay, so it's hierarchical, right? So we have to instantiate the employee class to be aware of the person variables, or we can instantiate the person class, but we'll have no knowledge of the employee. Okay, so let's just bring that back to how it was. So let's just change that back to employee and save that, and then run this again. Let's clear that down and run that again. Okay, so that's a very, very basic tutorial on class inheritance in PHP. But if you've got any questions, then please let me know. Put them in the comments section below. If you've found this tutorial helpful, then give it a thumbs up, press that like button. If you think other people might find it helpful, then please do share it around. Subscribe to get the next tutorials, so the next couple of PHP tutorials, as well as there's a Friday web chat every Friday I do a web chat as well, just talking about web development in general. So do subscribe to check that out. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you again soon. Thank you. Bye. Hello and welcome to the third part in the PHP Object Oriented Programming tutorials. Today we're going to look at visibility scopes. This is something that I've been banging on about in the last couple of videos, where I've been saying I'll talk about this later on. Well, today is the day. This tutorial we're going to focus on visibility scopes. Now there are three visibility scopes. There's public, private and protected. Now these visibility scopes can go on the methods as well as the properties. So where you see here public, all of these things, these are visibility scopes. So we have a public job title in this employee class, a public constructor and a public get job title. And likewise, if we went down to the person class, these are all public, and these are all public too. Now I talked about class inheritance in the second tutorial, in the previous tutorial. Do check that out if you haven't done so already, as well as the first tutorial where I talked about classes and objects in general. I'll leave a link to in the description below for both of those, as well as in the annotation bit up here, in the card bit up here in the top right hand corner. Okay, so let's talk about these scopes then. So let's just comment these just to talk about them. So public, private and protected. Now what do these do? Well, the public one, as you can probably guess, allows public access to these properties and these variables. So for example, let's scroll all the way down here where we're doing Jane, the instance of the employee class get job title. We don't actually need to do that, because if I was to just jump to that function it's returning the job title, and the job title itself is public, so we don't actually need to do call the get job title in order to return the property, because we can access the property directly. I'll just demonstrate that now. Let's scroll to the bottom again. Instead of calling get job title, we are literally going to do Jane job title, and we're going to save that out. I'm just going to comment this just so we can focus on this bit for now. And let's run that example. So now we've actually returned the backend developer, which is exactly what the get job title method was doing. But because the property is public, which is public here, it means that we can just access it directly. Not only can we access it directly, but we can also alter it. We can change the value of this property outside of the scope of this class. So let's scroll to the bottom again. Let's do Jane job title, and we're going to equal that to front end developer, and save that. Now this is actually going to change from, because what we're doing here is we've got Jane is a new instance of employee. We're passing in the backend developer as the first argument, which is the job title. I best just explain that just in case you haven't seen the other tutorials. So in the constructor here we have job title, and we are setting the job title to be the job title, the first argument here. Okay, so when we instantiate this class and we pass in the first argument being job title, we're saving that to be job title like that. So let's just scroll down to the bottom. So what we're doing here is we're actually on line 47, we're actually we're altering the value of job title to something else. So in this case, front end developer, and therefore on line 48 where we're echoing out Jane job title, this will actually change from back-end developer to front-end developer. Let's just save that down and run this. Oops. So there we go. So we've actually changed it. We've actually altered the value of this property within this class outside of the scope of the class. So on line 47, we are changing it from back-end developer to front-end developer, like so. So that's the public scope. Public basically means that you can access these properties and these methods from outside of the scope of the class, or from outside the scope of the class, and we can also alter the values of the property as well. Now the polar opposite of public is private, which is this one here. So let's just change that to be private, like so, and save that. Scroll to the bottom. And this is going to throw us an error because it's no longer public, it's now private. Let's just clear this down and run the file. And the error that we get is this here. It's a fatal error. It cannot access the private property employee job title. So as you've probably guessed, private properties are encapsulated within the object, within the class itself. So we cannot access job title from outside of the employee class. Job title must only be accessed from within the class. So for example, in this constructor here, we're setting job title as the first argument, and then we're accessing job title from within the scope of the employee class, and we're setting it to the variable. Okay, so let's scroll down here and let's remove this setting. And the way we would change, actually, let's talk about that. Yeah. So the way we would actually change the value front-end developer from outside of the scope of the class is we would use what's called accessor methods. Now these are broken up into two different methods. So we have a getter and we have a setter. So let's just build those in now. So we have public function, set job title. Save that, and we're going to pass in the value of job title, and we are going to set this job title is equal to job title, and save that. Now, if we because this is public, it means that we can access this method from within the employee class, and that is accessing the job title property. Even though it's private, it's accessing it from within this class, and therefore this can happen, this can work. We're setting that to job title. So let's scroll to the bottom, and instead of accessing the property directly, we're now going to call set job title, and we're going to pass this in as the first argument. So let's just copy that and save this. Okay, I'm going to run this again and it's still going to throw an error. I'll explain why in a minute. Let's just clear that down and run this again. And the error again is it cannot access the private property employee job title, but this time it's on line 52, and that's because we're still trying to access it from outside of the scope of this class. So echo Jane job title. So what we need to do here is use the second accessor method. In this case it would be a getter. So let's scroll to the top. I think we already have one. So yes, so here we're doing a public function get job title, and we're returning the job title. So we can actually do that now. So let's bring those back to life, and then do, instead of say hello, we're doing get job title. Oops, I best remove that. There we go, and there's no need for that too. So let's save that, clear the screen, and then run this. So now we can actually see that we've got front-end developer. So we've changed it, we've altered it using a public accessor method, which is a setter. So we've set the job title, passing in this value which it gets set to, and then we're echoing out the getter accessor method. So get excuse me, get job title. Excuse me. Now, why would you want to do this? What's the whole point in having getters and setters and so forth, and exposing properties in this manner? Well, we might want to force logic to go through setters if, for example, we want to enforce some sort of formatting rules, and therefore prevent these values from being changed from outside of the scope of the class unless they go through these setters, which then enforce the formatting rules. So let's just go back into this method here. We might want to, for example, make sure that we have uppercase the first letter within the job title. And let's just run that, save that, and then change that to be a lowercase f, for example. Let's save, and then let's run this. So even though we're trying to set it with a lowercase front end, we've actually uppercased it here, and that's being enforced within this set job title method, like so. And just for completeness, what we can do here is we can also do this set job title, passing in the job title like so, and therefore anything that gets added to the constructor will also be uppercased. And let's just demonstrate that now. So let's just comment out this setter, and let's just change that to be a lowercase b, save that, and run this. Whoops, and there we go. We've got a uppercase b for back-end developer, even though we've put in a lowercase like so. Okay, so that's private properties. We can also have private methods. So we could have this as private, so keep that private. That means that we can only access this this method from within this class. And let's scroll to the bottom here. Now we're trying to access this method from outside of the scope of this class, so we're going to save that, and we're going to just clear this. We will now get an error, and the error is that we can't call a private method get job title from the context of nothing. Basically this means from the context of outside of the scope of these classes. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, let's just scroll up and change that to public again, because the employee class extends the person class. Now, this is extension and inheritance is something that I touched on in the previous tutorial, so do check that out if you haven't done so already. But it basically means that we are ensuring that these methods can only be accessed from the scope of this class. Now, if we were to extend it, so for example here we're extending employee to person, we can, for example, limit the scope. So let's say we set that to private and save that. We now no longer have access to this say hello method from the employee. So let's try and do that. So let's change that to be say hello and save that. Let's just ensure that that is correct. So we are trying to run say hello from the person class that we are inheriting. So employee class extends person. So we have access to these public methods, but we don't have access to this private method. So let's just run that, and we should have an error, which we do here. So error, fatal error, call to private method person say hello from context blank. However, if we were to change that to public, for example, and then clear the screen like so, and then run that, we now have access to this method. So hello, my name is Jane Fisher, and so forth. So by having public methods and private properties and private methods and so forth, we can actually create some rules in our architecture of our objects to ensure that the scope is correct for when we need it and for when we don't need it. For example, we wouldn't want to have everything just publicly accessible and changeable from outside of the class. We might want to ensure that these variables get set, these properties get set using some sort of formatting to perhaps clean the variables. Maybe there are user inputs and so forth, and we need to sanitize them. Therefore, they need to go through some functions, some mechanisms to clean the variables out, to trim them down, to ensure that they don't have any SQL injection or anything like that, and so forth. And therefore we can encapsulate, we can isolate the logic into these objects, which is great for designing the architecture of the objects and the classes. Now, the third one that we haven't yet focused on is protected. Now, this is kind of a mishmash between public and private in the sense that it's protected, and therefore we have access from the inheritance point of view, but we don't have access from outside of the scope of the class. Let me just demonstrate that now. So let's say we change this to be protected, for example, right? So first name is protected. Let's just save that. Let's run this, go through here and do Jane. So we have access to the last name. If you can see in the IDE here, we have last name, and we also have gender, but we no longer have first name. I'm just going to try and access that first name, and let's echo that out. So echo first name, and let's just comment we don't, or remove that, we don't need that at the moment, and save that, clear this down and run the file. The error we have here is, again, we cannot access a protected property employee first name. However, we can access this from the inheriting class. So we can do, for example, we can do this first name. We can actually access the first name from the employee class, but we can't access it from outside of the scope of the classes, so from here, for example, and therefore we're ensuring that this first name property can only be accessed from this person class and any class that it inherits, whereas private was basically saying that it can't, like this property, a private property, cannot be accessed from any inheriting classes. Let's just demonstrate that now. So let's just change that back to private and scroll up. My IDE no longer gives me access to this first name. It's only last name, job title and gender. Whereas if I was to remove that, change that to be protected and save that, scroll up, my IDE should now offer me access to the first name, you see? And so likewise, what we want to do here is perhaps have a public method, public function, and we're going to have let's just put the say hello method within here. So let's just remove say hello from the U, or just copy that and put that into here. So now the employee can say hello. Hello, my name is first name, last name, and also let's just do a new line, and also forgive me, I'm thinking as I'm speaking, so let's just put in message. Message is equal to hello, my name is first name, last name, and also concat that to be message, my job title is, and this job title, like so. Let's just return the message. Okay, so at the moment job title is set to private and we are accessing it from this class, so that's fine. First name and last name are we're going to just set that to both be public, like so. So we should have access to all of these variables, and let's scroll down to the bottom and let's do echo Jane say hello, and we're just going to double check that, yeah, that is correct, good. And let's just clear this down and run that again. So now we've got hello, my name is Jane Fisher, my job title is backend developer. Let's just remove that blank space like that, just to give us a little bit more formatting. Now, if I was to change this to be private, we'll get an error because we can't access the first name from here. So let's just clear this, run that again, and we can see that we have an error. So we got hello, my name is, and then we can't, nothing there, Fisher, and this is actually a notice, undefined property first name, employee first name, and that's because we can't have access to this here. If I was to change that back to public and save that, clear this down, that will work, like so. Now, if I was to change that to protected and save that, it will also work. Let's just clear that down and then do that. So now we have hello, my name is Jane Fisher. We've changed that to be protected, the first name. But what we don't have access to is the first name from outside of the scope of this class. Let's just change that to be Jane first name. Oops, if I can spell it, first name, like so. If I was to clear that down, run that, we now get this cannot access protected property, even though we can have access to this protected property from inside the employee class. We don't have access to it from outside these classes, these person and these employee classes either. Okay, so that's private, protected, and public methods and properties in the visibility scope. If you've got any questions, then please let me know. Put them in the comment section below. If you found this video helpful, then give it a thumbs up, give it a like, and share it around if you think others might find this useful too. Please subscribe to pick up the next tutorials. I'm doing some more PHP tutorials, as well as web chats every Friday. So these are talks about web development every Friday, so do check those out. Thanks again for watching. Follow me on Twitter. Twitter handle is @PFWD. I shall see you again next week. Thank you. Bye. Hello and welcome to the next part of the PHP Object Oriented tutorials. Today we're going to look at property overloading using different magic methods that we haven't done so before. In the previous tutorial we looked at visibility scopes in objects. We were playing with the public, private and protected properties as well as methods. So if you haven't seen those already, that tutorial already, I've got a link in the description below and also in the top right hand corner here. Do check that out because this tutorial will make more sense if you've seen that. Okay, so property overloading then. We're going to use some magic methods, and the magic methods that we're going to use are __get and __ set. Now you may have noticed we've actually used some magic methods before. We've used the constructor, the construct here, and the magic methods are basically start with __. These are reserved method names that PHP has, so we couldn't create our own construct method with the __ because these have special meaning. So for example, this constructor here, this construct gets called whenever the class is instantiated, and likewise the set and the get magic methods are called whenever the property which cannot be accessed outside of the scope is accessed and set. So for example, we could have lots and lots of properties in employee, as well as in the person, I suppose, the class, that are set to private. So we could have lots of private properties, and if we wanted to access them outside of the scope of the class, we would need to use setters and getters, as I've mentioned in previous tutorials. But if we have lots and lots and lots of these things, then we would have lots and lots of methods to get and set. So for example, here in the person class, where we have first name, last name and gender, if these were all set to private, for example, we would need to use getters and setters to access each one of these outside the scope of the class. So we've got 3 properties here. That would mean 6 methods, so 3 getters and 3 setters. Let me just put those back to what they were. There is an easy way of doing this, or there is an easier way of accessing these methods, these properties, and that is to use the magic method set. So let's say, for example, instead of set job title like so, we would instead have public function __ set. As you can see, the ID has picked that up, passing in 2 arguments. The first is the name and the second is the value. Excuse me. So the name is the property that we wish to set, so we would do this, then the arrow symbol, and then we would do name is equal to the value like so. Now I'm just going to change that, because that will throw an error because we don't have that method anymore. So this job title, I'm just going to put that back to job title like so. Now and I'm going to remove I'll keep that in at the moment. So public function __ set, passing in the name of the property that we wish to set as well as the value we wish to set to. So in this case we would pass in job title and then the name, or sorry, the value of the job title, and that will just basically do what that's done, but here in a dynamic fashion. So we are accessing and setting this this property dynamically. So let's scroll to the bottom, and where we have Jane job title tester. So let's save that and see what happens, and let's just change that to be a get job title and run this, and we can see that we have changed the value of the job title to tester. Let's just explain what we've done here. So Jane arrow symbol and then job title is equal to tester. Now if you saw the previous tutorial, you will notice that Jane title, the job title, is actually set to private. So how are we actually how are we changing the value of that job title to be tester if it's private? Well, it's this underscore underscore set method that is doing that. Basically, this gets called whenever a property is trying to be accessed that doesn't have that is inaccessible from its scope. So basically, overloading basically means that we're creating dynamic properties and methods. So a dynamic entity in this sense would be processed via a magic method to establish itself within the class. So we have a private job title, which means that it cannot be accessed from outside of the scope of the class, but if it is accessed from outside the scope of the class, then this set method is called. So if I was to just comment that out, for example, and then run this, we will get an error because we're trying to access a private property job title from outside of the scope of the class. So let's just put that back and run that again. So now we have tester. Let's just clear that down just to give us some more room. Now, likewise with the setter, with this set method, we also have a get method too. So let's just scroll down here where we have this on line 54. So echo get job title. We don't need to do that anymore. If we were to just jump to that, we can actually now remove this, and instead of having get job title, we just do let's just remove all that, underscore underscore, and then get. And the name is like this here, where this is the name of the property that we wish to get. So we're just going to do a return of this this name, like so. And let's scroll to the bottom here and change that from this get job title, because this doesn't exist anymore. There is no method called get job title anymore. It's just these two, getters and setters. Let's just change that to just job title and save that. Run this, and we should see that we have the tester job title too. Let's scroll back up to here. Let's remove this and save that just to demonstrate. We should now get an error that says that we're trying to access a private property job title. Let's put that back and run that, and we can see that we now have tester again. Now, this is very useful if, for example, you have a class that has a lot of private properties that you wish to access, and also if you allow access to these properties from outside the scope of the class, and they all need to conform to some sort of format. So, for example, in the set, you might want to ensure that they all have uppercase values, for instance, and you would do that like this. And we could also do private, if I can spell it right, private, I don't know, let's just call this job number, for instance, and scroll down to the bottom. We can now do Jane job number is equal to 5, for instance, and we can echo out job number. I'm going to just put in a new line in between the two and run that again. Now we can see that we have the job title as well as the job number. And even though these are private properties, we can access these by using these set and get magic methods. These are methods that allow for property overloading. Now, that's the good reason of doing this is to allow these properties to be accessed from outside the scope of the class. But there is a trade-off, and the trade-off is that now you've removed the documentation that the IDE that that your I'm using NetBeans here, that your IDE has. So for example, if I was to do Jane, and then see, I haven't, there is no knowledge here of job title and job number, because, and it's because, if I was to move that, go back up, it's because these are set to private, and so the IDE knows that these are private, and therefore it doesn't have any idea of what these properties should be. If I was to put that to public, for example, and then scroll down here and do Jane, I can now see that we have job title, and in fact I can go even further than that. I can actually add some documentation to this. So if I was to put in some comments, let's say this is a string, and this is title of job, and save that. Scroll down, we can now see that we have Jane job title, and in the documentation we have title of job, type is a string. So that's the trade-off. The trade-off is basically that we have no documentation if we're using these magic methods. And also we're exposing our properties. We're allowing these properties to be overloaded from outside the scope of the class, and perhaps we don't want to do that. Perhaps we want to keep these encapsulated within the classes themselves. But that is property overloading. I hope you found it useful. If you've got any questions, then please leave them in the comment section below. Like the video if you found it helpful, share it around if you think others will do so as well. Thanks again for watching. Follow me on Twitter, my name's PFWD, and I shall see you again next week. Cheers, bye. Hello and welcome to the next PHP Object Oriented Programming tutorial. Today we're going to look at class constants. Now these are values that never change within a class. So these aren't variables, these aren't properties, these aren't methods, these are constant values. Now in the previous tutorial, I should mention, we looked at getters and setters and magic methods to do property overloading. Basically these are the __ set and __ get. If you haven't seen that video, I would definitely recommend checking it out. I'll put a link in the description below as well as in the top right hand corner. I recommend viewing that because this tutorial might become a little bit more clearer. Okay, so class constants then. Like I said, these are values that never change within a class, and you can't change them from outside the class either. Now these are very handy when you've created a class that perhaps uses an API, and the API has a value, perhaps it's got a token or a key, and that value never changes throughout the lifespan of the class, and therefore it is a constant value, and so you can set that, you can hard code that within your class. Just for demonstration though, we're going to create some constant values here, and we're going to start by using the const keyword, and we need to have the name of the constant that we wish to set. So in this case we're going to have just company name, like so. We're going to equal that to just Acme, like that, and we're going to put the semicolon at the end, save the file, and you can see that the IDE here, my IDE, has noticed that this is a const keyword, and therefore that is italicized, so this is in italics. And I've also uppercased this. It's just basically my my standard. Whenever I write constants, I always put them as uppercase, and the properties are always camel case, and in the constants I've always got an underscore to denote a space. Okay, so we can access this from outside of the scope of the class, and we do this by, if I was to scroll right to the bottom, we could do this by just echoing out employee, and then : company name. And let's just save that and run the file. Okay, so we can see that we've got Acme that has been displayed. And so we're using employee because that's the class, colon, and then the constant name, and we're echoing it out. Now we can also access the variable from inside the scope of the class. I'm just going to comment that out, scroll to the top, and I'm going to do echo. And because we're inside the employee, we need to do self colon company name, and so this is just going to echo out the company name when the class is instantiated. So let's just run that, and we can see that it has echoed that out as well. Let's just remove this line here and save that. Now what we can't do, however, is we can't set this constant value, because it is a constant value. Once it's been set in the class, it can never be changed. So we can't do this. For example, we can't save that. In fact, my IDE has put a nice red underscore or line underneath here to say that it just can't, it just fails. And it's because this equal sign is unexpected, because constants can't actually have their values change. So let's just clear that down, whoops, and run this just to demonstrate that we have an error. So it's unexpected equal sign, and that's because we cannot change its value once it's set in the class. Now we have two classes here. We have the employee and the person class, and the employee extends the person class. So let's just create a constant within the person class and see if we can access it from the employee class. So we're going to create a constant again, so the const keyword and then the name, and we're just going to have I underscore color, and then we're going to equal that to be brown. Save that. Now can we access the I color from within this employee class? Well, it's extending, so we must have access to these variables, these properties, and these methods because they're all public. We also have access to the constant, and we use what's called a parent keyword to access parent attributes or parent constants as well as parent methods. And we do that like so. If we were to do echo parent and then iColor, we can access the iColor from this constructor. And notice here we have parent colon construct. This is running the parent constructor from this constructor. So let's just clear that down and run this as an example. And we can see that we have brown. We've accessed the brown constant, the iColor constant, from within this constructor, from within the employee person. Now, if we were to access iColor again, but from within, whoops, the person class, we would need to use self, because we're referencing the class that we're in. So self iColor, and let's just echo that out as a demonstration. Whoops, if I can spell echo correctly. There we go. So let's clear this down and run it again. We can see that we have echoed out brown again, like so. And we cannot do, we can't, like I said before, we can't actually set the value, but we can access this value from outside of the scope of the class. So we can do employee colon iColor, and the reason why we can do that is because of the class employee extends. So if I was to echo that, extends the person class. So employee has access to the iColor. Okay, so that's class constants. This is a quick demonstration of how we can create class constants and how we can use them. If you found this tutorial helpful, then do like the tutorial and share it around if you think others might find it useful too. If you've got any comments or questions, then leave them in the comment section below and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks again for watching. I shall see you again next week. Thank you. Bye. and welcome to another PHP tutorial regarding object-oriented programming. In the previous tutorial we looked at the constant keyword and talking about what is a constant value and how we can access it and so forth. If you haven't done so already, do check that video out. I'll leave a link in the description below as well as in the top right hand corner. Today, however, we're going to look at the static keyword, what it means, how to use it, and why it's there. So before I get into that, let's just tidy this up. Let's just remove those 3 lines because we don't actually need them. Now, the static keyword basically means that, well, you put the static keyword before a property or a method. So in the same way as we have public scopes and private scopes, as well as the constant keyword, we would have a static keyword and then the property name and then its value, or we would have a static method. So it would be like a static function and so forth. Now, static properties and static methods can be accessed from outside of the scope of the class in the same sense, I suppose, as these constants. So employee : iColor can be accessed from outside of the scope of the class. But the big difference here, well, apart from it being a constant and a property, is that static methods and static properties can be accessed without instantiating the actual class itself. So, for example, let's just create a basic static property. So static, and then we're going to have, we're just going to do employee number, for example. This isn't a very good example, but I'll just put that in for now. So employee number. Now what we can do is, without actually instantiating this class, we can now do echo employee and we can access this employee number like so. Let's save that and let's run this file. So we can actually now get the employee number without instantiating the class. So there's no instantiation. It's not, this isn't being touched, so the constructor isn't being touched at all. We haven't instantiated this class. We are literally just pulling out this property from the employee class. Now, likewise with the properties, we can also do these with the methods. So, for example, I could have a public static. Oops, if I can spell it. Public static function, and we're just going to have this as get employee number. Employee number, yep, and we're just going to return self, because we have to reference itself, employee number. And we scroll down to here, and instead of doing like we had done before, instead of doing variable Jane is equal to a new instance of employee and passing in the variables, we can literally do this. We can do employee : oops, get employee number like that. Let's save that and run this. So we've got the same value here, 100, and we haven't instantiated the class at all. We are literally running a static method from the employee class, which is called the get employee number. Now notice I've got a public static, so I've actually put the visibility scope in front of or behind of the static keyword. Now if I was to change that to private, what do you think is going to happen? If I put that to private and save that, scroll down here, let's just clear this screen to give us some room and then run that, it's going to throw an error. It's actually going to say that we can't access this private method from the context of nothing. Now this basically means that we can have static methods as well as, I suppose, static properties, because we can also do a public static. I'll do it on the right side here, public static method. Excuse me. It means basically that only this class can actually access this static variable. So if we were to just comment that out, for example, we could do this. If we change that to that is still private, what we could do is in the constructor here is we could do self employee number in, and also we can also do self get employee number, which I'm just gonna demonstrate. Let's just echo that out. So scroll to the bottom, and then we're going to do a new instance. So Jane is equal to a new instance of employee, passes in all of these variables. I'm just going to put that as test, and also test for now, and we don't need to pass the gender because that's optional. Save that, and we should have the return or the echo, because that's in the constructor, so at 100. So let's just jump into that class again. So notice here on line 24 we are actually echoing out the get employee number method, which is where did I put it? Up here. So we can actually restrict the visibility of these static keywords as well, these static items. So when is it a good time to use static properties and methods? This is a bit of a controversial topic, I suppose. I haven't really given it a very good example. Employee number will be a variable. It can change, and it really shouldn't be defined statically like this. So when is a good time to use static keywords? Well, in my opinion, when you're using things like objects that contain variables that need to change and need to be encapsulated within itself, I would instantiate the object and then pass the variables through, perhaps in a constructor or some setter methods and so forth. And I wouldn't actually declare them as static. I would only use the static keywords when I'm actually using, for example, a class that has a series of utility methods. So for example, we could have, instead of get employee number, we could have generate payslip, for example, right? Because that's actually doing something. That's actually a tool that we can use. We don't have to instantiate this employee class in order to generate the payslip. We can literally just generate the payslip. And if I was to change that to something a little bit more user-friendly, let's say this was PAYE number, for example, and change that, then it makes a little bit more sense. So let's just change that. We're going to need to just remove that down here, scroll to the bottom here, and we're going to do an echo of employee, and it is, oh, hang on, bear with me a minute. Let's just scroll back up. What am I missing? Oh yes, sorry. I need to change that to be public to allow the scope. There we go. So if I was to echo that now, yeah, we have 100. Now that could just be the, that could generate a PDF perhaps of the payslip. One thing I should note though is in this static method, what we can't do is we can't use or reference this within this static method. If I did this, let's say job title, for example, or let's use job number. Let's just set job number to be 10 and then return that as an example. This is going to throw us an error, so let's just do a clear and then run that. Now we have an issue here because we're using this when not in the object context, and basically that means is that the object itself hasn't been instantiated. So that's something to definitely look out for. If you're using static methods in this way, you cannot actually use the properties or access the properties in the same way as a normal instantiated class. Okay, so here where we're using return this job number, this will only work if the job number is a static job number. And whoops, sorry, the old magic mouse went a bit nuts there. If I was to save that and change this to be self job number and save that, clear this down, whoops, and then run that again. Now we have the job number, which is 10. Another thing I should note is inheritance. So the employee extends the person. So if I had a static variable on here, so let's say we had static, we'll set this to be protected just as an example of the variability scope. So a protected static, and we're just gonna call this blood type, and it's just going to be a positive, and save that. Now what we can do is we can access this this blood type from another static method. So we could just change this to be self and then blood type, so we can actually access the blood type static variable by calling self. And the reason why we can do this is because it extends the person. Let's save that, let's run this again, and we have a plus. So that's static keywords and static methods and static properties. If you've got any questions or comments, then please let me know, put them in the comment section below. If you found this helpful, then give it a thumbs up, share it around. Maybe others might find it useful too. Follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @PFWD. I've also got a Facebook page for this How to Code Well channel, so do check that out. Put the links in both of those social media things in the description below. Thanks again for watching, and I shall see you again next week. Thank you. Bye.